Good afternoon and welcome to the INWED 2023 webinar. My name is Elizabeth Donnelly and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Women's Engineering Society here in the United Kingdom. I'm delighted that you have joined us today from wherever you may be in the world to celebrate our flagship campaign, International Women in Engineering Day. Today marks 10 years since INWED began, and we've been thrilled to see it grow into a truly global event. Our theme for this year is Make Safety Seen, celebrating the work of women engineers who are keeping everyone safe wherever we are, whether at work or leisure, at home or online. We have some fantastic speakers joining us today, including President from the Women's Engineering Society, Dame Dawn, Anthony Firth, Historic England, engineering historian Dr. Neela Baker, OBE. We're also very excited to be announcing the 2023 Top 50 Women in Engineering. This year's awards recognise women engineers who are engaged in safety and security and are protecting the public through their work. And we will be joined by 3 of our winners later in the webinar to hear more about their experiences. Now, before we begin, I'd like to make you more aware of some of the features of the Big Marker platform. You are welcome to interact with fellow attendees via the chat box, and you'll see the chat box in your bottom right-hand corner, a little white bubble saying chat on a blue background. You'll be able in the chat in the public to say to type your questions. And then if you've got any questions, if you can do in the Q&A, and then we will look that. Now, if you do type a question in the Q&A and we decide to publish it, it may be that your question will disappear. Don't worry, it will just be in the publish section, not the news section. Okay. You are welcome to interact with fellow attendees via chat, and there will be some time set aside for questions. And all that is left for me to say is thank you for supporting INWED. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. We're already trending on Twitter in the United Kingdom at number 2. Hopefully, if you can use the hashtag INWED23 or hashtag Make Safety Seen, we can get to number 1 shortly. And it's now my very great pleasure to introduce Dame Dawn Childs. Dawn, welcome.
Hello, Elizabeth, and hello everybody online. I'm so pleased to be opening up with Elizabeth this fantastic day of celebrations and highlighting fabulous women engineers all around the world. And yes, it's my privilege to be here to talk to you today.
Dawn has been the president of the Women's Engineering Society for 5 years and will be standing down in October after a magnificent time in helping break us into a much more professional and really fantastic organisation supporting women engineers and supporting industry. And so I'd like to talk to you, Dawn, about your fabulous career. You started out in the Royal Air Force, and you, when you finished, you were the Deputy Chief Engineer, I understand. So, in view of our theme of safety and security, what were the biggest safety challenges that you encountered as an engineer in the Royal Air Force?
And so the biggest challenge from a safety perspective was, of course, airworthiness. So, is an aircraft fit to fly, and will it keep everybody on board safe, and of course anybody on the ground safe that it happens to fly over? So on almost a daily basis, whenever I was operating on whichever aircraft fleets in the Air Force, we had to make assessments about airworthiness. And the military airworthiness system is unique and is slightly different to or at the time was slightly different to the civil aviation system, in that you could actually give an aircraft a limitation or sign it as fit for flight subject to just your assessment, so that the more senior you got, the more demanding safety decisions you had to make about the airworthiness of an aircraft, and it was beyond the regulations that were set for civil platforms. So yes, there used to be a great tool that we used, which was a sort of risk analysis tool, where if you had a fault with an aircraft, you could then make an assessment around its flight airworthiness. And so my starting question would always be, is this going to kill anybody? So am I making a decision that is going to kill someone? And then you worked backwards from there. So on a daily basis, as say, you were juggling technical faults and the airworthiness of aircraft. So safety critical at all times.
So on the one hand, you've got a system where your regulations go beyond what is required for Civil Aviation Authority, but on the other, it's you as a single person signing that off. So that was a huge responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even as a junior officer, so at the very beginning of my career, I was still making, but within in closer guardrails, those sort of airworthiness assessments. So the more senior you got, the more demanding the assessments were made. You made. So all through the career, you're literally taking a personal assessment as to whether the aircraft is fit to fly. Of course, you're supported by a massive team of experts. So you know, the senior aircraftmen and the technical engineers are fantastic, and you can always reach back to even the airworthiness authority, so the original aircraft manufacturer, and that sounds great. But of course, if you're in the middle of a war zone and you are the engineer on the ground, then that ability to reach back isn't always there in the moment that you need to make that assessment. So oftentimes it is you singularly that with the input from the great technical team that is making that judgment.
I love that not only you trusted as a young officer, and obviously you became much more senior, but it's the proof of the training and the grounding and the backing that you have from your team. And I think that today we're obviously very safety conscious, but um, as a responsibility, being young, it was quite challenging, I imagine. But then you once told me that when you were 22, you were in charge of a lot of people.
Indeed, it doesn't seem to, well, it seemed ironic that at the beginning of my career I had quite large teams and in charge of various aircraft platforms on the front line, as it was called. So getting them flying on a daily basis, and then as you go up through middle management, your teams seem to get smaller. So you end up doing sort of individual airworthiness assessments. So you're maybe the aircraft type authority. So you're sort of desk based, and you maybe have a team or one or two professionals who are helping you to do the sort of the back office technical engineering for aircraft types. And then it sort of grows up again, and your teams expand as you work your way up, and you maybe get a on the front line again senior engineer to. So yeah, so I went from starting with sort of 50 or 60 in my team as a 20-odd-year-old to then going down to just me and some roles as I was going through middle management. And then one of my last tours, I was the head of engineering at Waddington. So there were hundreds of engineers under my purview there.
I find that wonderful that I mean, it really is testament to the military training and confidence that they have in young people. And for anyone watching who's interested in joining their country's military or even the UK military, do feel confident that you'll be given the guidance and training, and you too can do as well as Dawn has. So you then left the Royal Air Force and you became the head of engineering at Gatwick Airport, the first woman to run a major airport in the UK. Is that correct?
Um, Yes, from an engineering perspective, absolutely. I was the first woman to be a head of engineering at an airport. I also had a role as one of the senior operational leaders. So during disruption, and I'm sure many people on the call will have been in disruption at an airport. Either the baggage system has failed and there's people waiting to get their luggage, or there's an issue with the runway or an issue with the weather, and pretty quickly you get tens of thousands of people who are not very happy. At the airport, you maybe have some technical issues to deal with as well. So I used to be one of the silver and gold commanders who used to run the airport in disruption. And yes, it was definitely a different type of safety and a bit of a challenge there, because you have so many public members of the public to deal with. So it's not just the technical part of the airport and it's being safe, it's the interaction on a daily basis with thousands of members of the public that was a particular question and a particular risk that had to be managed.
And I mean, Gatwick Airport's the second London airport. It's got a lot of traffic through it. Would you remember any particular safety challenges or like any particular events?
Yes, so we had several occasions whilst I was there where the ground handlers would either go on strike or be on a work to rule. So you end up with lots of aircraft which aren't able to get onto aircraft stands because the ground handlers are not managing the aircraft, not managing the putting the aircraft into their parking positions, and also offloading the passengers and the luggage. So that in itself created havoc, and the safety challenge of having aircraft coming into the airport and not being able to go to their safe place to park, and having lots of them queued up along the taxiways and the runways, as well as the thousands of people that then ended up displaced, so either in the airport itself, or maybe at the gates waiting to get onto aircraft, or maybe on aircraft. So if it's a particularly hot day like the weather we're currently enjoying, having passengers on an aircraft that is sat on the deck for an hour in the heat, it's not good. There are multiple safety challenges in many different dimensions, both technical and human.
Yeah. So you were there for how many years were you at Gatwick?
Just under 4.
Just under 4, yeah. And I can understand moving from the Royal Air Force to working with aircraft and airports, absolutely a good progression. But then you moved into Merlin Entertainment, looking after roller coasters. So tell me about that appointment.
And it was actually entirely safety driven. So many people will remember the very unfortunate incident that happened with the Smiler roller coaster at Alton Towers, where two of the cars crashed into each other, and people were injured, and they had life-changing injuries. The incident itself was not dealt with as well as it potentially could have been, and the underlying root cause of the incident was embedded in engineering and engineering practices. So the health and safety executive at the time looked at Merlin and sort of opined on the fact that they had maybe 130 theme parks and attractions on a global scale, and they had directors of many things but no director of engineering. So I was brought in to Merlin to create the directorate of engineering, and to look across the entire portfolio of theme parks and attractions, and create a safe engineering set of practices and procedures.
So with respect to that Smiler incident, which was absolutely tragic, and absolute credit to Merlin for taking responsibility so quickly and for ensuring that the people affected were taken care of. I mean, let's absolutely say that. So you introduced some quite serious changes that I think probably look obvious now, but can you explain the big changes that you brought in? I'm just thinking about the CCTV and the signing off.
Yeah. So there were multiple technical things that were changes that were made to the roller coaster setup, and also the operation and our engineering practices. A couple of key components that we worked closely with the safety teams at the particular theme parks on were anemometers, so wind meters on the roller coasters, because one of the underlying causes of the incident was the fact that the wind was gusting quite heavily on the day of the accident. And there was this one particular loop on the Smiler coaster called the Cobra Loop, and it was quite far down the track, so the roller coaster's momentum needed to still be there for it to get around this loop. And when you had a headwind, obviously it bled off the momentum, and the car couldn't get around the loop, so it stalled in the bottom of this loop, and it was the stalled car that this other car crashed into. So knowing actually what the wind was at the roller coaster itself, rather than a generic wind meter in the theme park, was very important, because it was so safety critical to know the actual wind limits of that roller coaster, and to know the reading at the site of the roller coaster, rather than some theme parks that large. Alton Towers is huge, so having a wind meter at a certain point rather than at the point of the roller coaster was part of the cause of the incident. The other piece was around CCTV. So the roller coaster ride itself was quite large, and the operator sits in a room, and they can see a lot of the roller coaster, but this particular loop they couldn't see, so they couldn't see that there was a car stuck in the bottom of the loop. So having CCTV all the way around the roller coaster, whenever there's a piece of the roller coaster track that the operator cannot visually see from their operating booth, was very important. So that those two physical changes were made. We also made changes to engineering practices and procedures. So in this particular incident, an engineer could reset the safety protocols or the safety system of the roller coaster. It was then made part of the process that they had to get independent authorization to make any such resets, so that no singular person could make a judgment about the safety of the roller coaster on their own. They needed to get independent eyes onto that decision.
That's very significant, particularly because you've got hundreds of people wanting to get the roller coaster and they don't like the 25-minute delay while you get an independent verifier. But when you understand the consequences of not having that verification, then absolutely I'd be prepared to wait, because nobody wants to have a lovely day out completely ruined by a terrible, terrible accident. And
Indeed.
I love the fact that engineering is in things like roller coasters, because we all spend our life, we work, we have our houses and our homes, we go to entertainment, and just the thought of that somebody is really looking behind the fun stuff, the roller coaster, the London Eye, and ensuring that these wonderful creations do not actually break and hurt people. I mean, that's terrific. And I think it just shows the wide range of careers, that if you are into the fun roller coaster stuff, you can still be an engineer.
And I think that's so true. It's oftentimes lost on particularly on young people wanting to engage in perhaps an engineering career or not really understanding about engineering. The breadth of availability of types of roles is completely misunderstood. So I think I'm one of very few engineers that has moved between different sectors within engineering, and also spread across different disciplines in engineering. So if you train as a mechanical engineer, like my base degree was mechanical engineering, I then went straight into aviation. At the airport, I was doing civils, some electrical, infrastructure, facilities management, then roller coasters and theme parks. Goodness me, every single type of engineering you could ever dream of, and some that you didn't even know existed were involved in that. And then onwards to National Grid, so gas and electricity. And now I find myself in data centers, which is power and cooling. So engineering principles are exactly that, basic engineering principles. You can apply them to many things. Once you've been trained in the engineering discipline, any type of discipline, you can apply that to a broad range of job types. And I think getting an understanding of those different job types out there, so that the young kids going through their training now can really think about the type of thing they might want to get involved in.
Yeah, I mean, you've had such a varied career. You went to National Grid, where you're looking at gas and electric power and generation, which is fantastic. And that was in the middle of the pandemic. How did you keep the workforce safe when they had to be working on site?
And so the clearly critical to keep the National Grid operating throughout the pandemic, because power is part of critical national infrastructure. So we had quite a lot of very close thinking about how to keep the workforce both operating but also safe. And so particularly for our electricity system and gas system operators, we had the shift engineers actually staying on site, and we put them through a rotation. So they'd go into a pod, an isolation pod, for a number of weeks, and then go on to shift. They'd be away from their family for weeks at a time, to then go back, come back out of that shift rotation, and another lot would go into isolation. So we kept both them safe and also kept the national infrastructure going. It was very tense times, very difficult, and the crews on the ground did an amazing job to make sure that everybody who was working from home, or frankly just trying to stay alive, was able to do so and had all of the power and energy they needed.
I mean, that's fantastic, particularly those engineers who were giving up their family life, because it was a very difficult time. I remember I was at home with my partner and his daughter, and she's clinically vulnerable, so we were trying to be very careful about who we mixed with. And Martin was going to the supermarket very early in the morning to mix with as few people as possible. But the thought of him being away from us for a long time, or me being away from them, is just quite difficult. So presumably you also helps them with their downtime, so keeping in touch with their families, and also using up, not being on work all the time.
Absolutely, welfare was topmost of mind for both for the people that were in these pods and had to keep the infrastructure operating, but also for the engineers on the construction sites, because construction sites were allowed to keep working and operating throughout the time. So keeping on top of the routine COVID testing, literally sometimes twice daily, making sure that that they stayed safe, and if they were going back to their family stayed safe was absolutely of paramount importance.
And then on top of that, you then changed career again to go to Pure Data Global. So tell me more about Pure Data and what they do.
So we're a global data center company, and for those in the audience who are probably thinking, like I was when I was first approached about the job, what on earth is a data center? It's the physical manifestation of the cloud. So this fantastic cloud where all the data lives, and where you maybe keep all your pictures and your videos and you know, the back end of the internet, effectively, where the information flows. That has a physical presence, and those server racks are kept in large halls, and the Pure data centers operate those large halls. We effectively have the power and the cooling that enables the server racks to stay at functioning, and also to stay within their optimum operating temperature. So yeah, so if you drive down a motorway and you see a big, very sort of, you know, boring looking warehouse somewhere, it might well be a data center.
I'm reminded of a cartoon that said, well, what is the cloud? And people assuming it's in the air. And somebody else said, it's somebody else's computer. And you literally provide the infrastructure for those other computers where our data is stored. And big safety challenges there. What's your challenge? I mean, because you now run the whole of Pure Data Global, which is fantastic. Another acknowledgement of your talent and experience. So what's your big safety challenges with the data center?
And so the uptime required in a data center, because clearly, you know, everybody needs to get their data immediately, and particularly critical national infrastructure like hospitals, banks, they need to have their data flowing at all times. So we operate a service level of 5.9, so 99.999%. And for anyone that knows about uptime and is trying to get good uptime from any piece of technical equipment, they'll know that that's hugely demanding, and actually is more than National Grid had. So it's particularly demanding, and we have not only the power coming into the site from the National Grid, but we also have our own high voltage backup power generation. And so that in itself, any high voltage atmosphere or any high voltage operator will know that the safety required to have any form of electrical multiple megawatts requires a significant suite of safety protocols. And so the biggest challenge that I have is making sure that all of my engineers who operate and do any of the HV switching for me have the right safety protocols, because it's mission critical. We have a service level to meet and to commit to, but what I cannot have happen is somebody making a quick decision because they're trying to upkeep the service level and making a false move on a switching activity. So yeah, so high voltage is my biggest safety challenge.
And I can imagine, you know, with the climate change, that the temperature, the way the weather's changing, that might be more difficult in some areas, because you truly are a global organization. So you've been the president of the Women's Engineering Society for the last 5 years, and I think you joined as president about 3 or 4 months after I joined as the chief executive officer. So we've worked very closely together in the last 5 years. What have you enjoyed the most about being our president?
It's the people, and it's the feeling that we're sort of making a difference in some way, and allowing both women engineers who have already embarked on their career to hopefully make the best version of their career that they want, and to progress in their career as far as they wish to go, and supporting them in that, but also enabling new people to engineering to understand the challenges that there are and how they can best navigate, and the types of different jobs available. So meeting all the people, being able to help and support the people, that's been the best thing.
Thank you. Now we've got a little bit of time for questions. I've just heard that INWED 23 is now trending at #1 on Twitter in the UK. So thank you very much for the 3rd or 4th year running we're doing that. I'm delighted. And also, I'm seeing that we've got lots of people from different countries in the chat. I can't see you all, but there's definitely Nigeria I've seen, and others. So if you want to put your countries in the chat, that really helps us to know the locations. So does anybody have any questions? I see people raising their hands, but if you could put the questions in the Q&A, then we can ask that. So I can see that in the Q&A we have, oh gosh, goodness me. How do you ensure psychological safety in what is a very physically safety related environment? And that comes from Dominic Dawson.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think it links around to well-being, but also ensuring that the culture is right. And so in aviation, we often talked about a just culture, and so knowing that if you make a decision, if you don't make an optimum decision, or if there's something in the system that isn't enabling you to operate in the way that you should or need to operate, knowing that you can either speak up about it, or that if you're not going to be basically shot at dawn for making a bad decision, if actually it was the only decision you could make given the system that you're working in or the facts that you have at your fingertips, knowing that you've empowered people and you trust them and they trust you to have this just culture is the most important thing in the world. And I think that then gives them the psychological safety, because it's very demanding, and these safety critical environments need high performance, so it can be very stressful for people, and particularly if they then feel that they're going to be penalized or blamed for doing something wrong or for identifying a problem.
Yeah, I think psychological safety, it's a concept that's very now, and we didn't think about that when I certainly joined the workforce in the 90s. I really like that we're doing that. I think it's because people spend so much time at work. Is that your experience as well?
Indeed, yeah, absolutely, and I think there's another question there about work-life balance, and I think that work-life balance and being able to switch off, and and the sort of the mindfulness piece is so important, because if your brain is working a million miles an hour, or if you come to work and if you're in a safety critical role and your mind just isn't in quite the right place, then you're more likely to make an error of judgment or to actually make a physical error. So I think having that downtime, for me, sort of, although I don't meditate or anything, I do ride, and when you're riding a horse, you have to focus on the horse. If your mind is somewhere
Yeah.
else, then you're actually going to be unsafe in a whole different way, because the horse has a mind of its own. So that's my way of getting downtime and making sure that I properly switch off, so I can be prepared and top of my game for the next day at work.
I mean, that's a great response. I've not been riding, but I can imagine that you've kind of got to concentrate on the horse because it's a living creature you're interacting with. And Ilaf Razak has said, "Can I ask how you managed work-life balance and staying mentally sane?" And that's from Ilaf, is in Adelaide, Australia.
Fabulous to be speaking to everybody around the globe. It's so exciting, and so yeah, it's kind of interesting, because when I joined the military, the contract that I signed said that I couldn't have children, and that if I did, they'd throw me out and I'd have to pay back all of the money they spent on my training. So I don't have a family to balance with, because it was sort of predetermined that I chose career over family. That was then made illegal in the UK. So don't panic, anybody who's thinking of joining the military. That's not a thing anymore. That was in the early 90s. But it kind of set a mindset. So I don't have children that I need to worry about, but I have had the horse. So making sure that I have enough time to go either walking with my husband or go riding on my horse or other people's horses. It's the most important thing in the world to me, and that just gives me that ability to switch off and to make sure I keep that work-life balance somewhere. But yeah, unfortunately, I never had to balance a family as well, because that would have, I think, been a bit challenging for me.
Yeah, we're nearly ready to go to our next speaker, but I'm going to ask you another question because I think it links two of your roles, which is the role at Merlin Entertainment and National Grid. Are theme parks looking at renewable energy sources to power their rides? Actually, that's very important, because some people might consider it to be frivolous, but it's also important for people to enjoy their lives. So how are we managing to limit the impact of theme parks?
Um, and so I don't know what because I've been out of Merlin for a few years now, but definitely they were looking at solar energy at the time. That there is also some potential regenerative, from depending on the type of coaster, there's potential regenerative energy there. And of course, once the roller coaster has gone up, then it's self-perpetuating, so that there's no power required in that bit. So there were a few solutions that they were looking at. Definitely from a data center perspective, which I can talk about, we are absolutely looking at, because the massive power demand, so we're absolutely looking at how to make that the most sustainable it can be, and actually we're aiming to have a carbon negative impact. So the new data centers that we're building, we're trying to do them in such a way that they're actually additive, and their footprint and their impact is less, and we're taking away some of the carbon footprint of other things. So yeah, so that's definitely the focus. Any business, whatever it is, will be focusing on sustainability. It's the biggest issue to solve.
Safety is not always seen as exciting, and sometimes colleagues prefer to take risks. How can we persuade people that it is important and that proper safety management is exciting and worth spending time on? That's from Deborah Sims.
And so I think, you know, it's, people are never going to be excited about it until it impacts them. And I think the biggest mantra has to be that you know, safety should be boring, to be frank, because it's got to be rigorous, but it's about defensive value. So if you're a business leader, or if you're working within a business, the impact of not being rigorous about safety and not doing it properly is so significant that you don't even want to consider that. So you have to lean into safety. It's got to be the underlying lifeblood. If you don't lean into safety, then you won't survive as a business.
Yeah, I'm reminded in myself and my experience that when I was 15, I tried to get on a train that had one of the old slam doors, and I was successful in opening the door, but unsuccessful in that I slipped between the train and the platform. I was very lucky because the footplate that the driver used on the back engine broke against my legs, and I was then flung over the buffer and damaged my teeth. So I didn't even break my leg. And now you can't literally do that anymore because they have these doors that shut, and you can't open a door once the train was moving. It did teach me not to be late. And then I was in a car crash when I was 18, and it was in this was in 1987, and I was in the back seat, and it was a vehicle that had a backseat seatbelt. And my dad said, if you're in my car and there's a seatbelt, you must wear it. And we were then in a head-on collision that wasn't my dad's fault at all. And that seatbelt actually saved my life, because my father had a massive, big, heavy Bible on the back shelf that went through both windscreens. And if I'd been in the back seat untethered, that could have been me. And admittedly, these are things that were happening 30 years ago. But I just feel that when you understand the consequences for individuals of not being safe, that actually being able to say, this is the most important thing that we do, is really important. I'm delighted to have spoken to you. I think and hope that everyone who's watching will understand and agree that you being granted a damehood in the New Year Honours list this year was absolutely appropriate. So congratulations on that. I am sad you'll be standing down as our president, but I wish you absolutely the very best in your career. We've still got another 5 months with you, and thank you for being here today on INWED 2023.
Thank you so much. It's my privilege, and enjoy the rest of INWED, everybody, and have a great time. Big up to women engineers. Thank you.
Thank you. There have been plenty more questions, but we could have gone on for much longer, but I have more people to bring you at the moment. So I'm now like to introduce Amanda Creek, and we weren't quite sure that Amanda was going to be on the call this morning, but actually she has now managed it. So if you just bear with me one moment. So Amanda is currently the EMEA CIO, Managing Director, Head of EMEA Technology and Operations Risk at Morgan Stanley. She's previously held positions as Head of Technology Risk for Goldman Sachs and Director Information Security COE for EMEA at EY. And I'm delighted to introduce her to talk about a female CIO's perspective of a career in banking technology. Amanda. I'm just waiting for her to turn on her devices, and hopefully we should see her soon. I must admit that it's wonderful to see all these wonderful countries. We've got Philadelphia in the USA, Italy, Ontario, Canada, Germany, obviously the lots in the UK, Boston, the USA, Greece, Trinidad and Tobago. My goodness me, it's probably the middle of the night still there. Southampton and Manchester, India, Oh, it's just so wonderful. We really truly are global. In fact, we started this webinar in 2020 because of the global pandemic, and we decided that we would continue to have the webinar when we discovered that all these people from around the world were joining us. And it's just really a great opportunity for us to introduce many, many people from around the world and see that what we're doing. In the UK, women engineers are 16.5% of all engineers. It's not a great number, but we're hoping it will increase. And I understand in other countries that number is larger, which is fantastic. So it just looks like Amanda's not actually able. She's having some connection problems. So, Dawn, if you're still there, perhaps we can have some. I can ask you some of these other questions that we had, because my goodness me, there's a great one here. Hello. If you could change one thing to help keep more women in engineering through their careers, what would it be?
And so I think that would be the self limitations that we put on ourselves. So people talk about the imposter syndrome, and I don't know if anybody uses LinkedIn. There was a very inspirational lady on LinkedIn recently who did an end of graduation talk at a US university, and she compared imposter syndrome to bike face, and so go look at it. It's an amazing speech. It went on for about 20 minutes, so I won't repeat it here. But effectively, she was suggesting that imposter syndrome was something made up by guys to keep us in our place, effectively. So by creating this thing where we felt that we were imposters, and that it was actually a physical thing, and we we had to try and push and get over this problem, this imposter syndrome issue, it created another thing for us to worry about, and we self-limit ourselves. And definitely I have suffered through that in my career. I always thought I shouldn't be doing this job, or my goodness, am I qualified enough? Wouldn't he be better? All those things that people tell us about imposter syndrome. If we can get over ourselves and actually lean in and not put limitations on ourselves, then it's going to be far easier for us to make that shift, and to ensure that we can better guard against all of the other challenges that might be put in our way. So so stop self-limiting ourselves.
Yeah, and I always wonder about imposter syndrome, because some men suffer from it as well. And I imagine back in the days when we lived in small tribes of 125 people, if the really, really clever people in the room are going, I'm not sure I've got this right, and the really stupid people are going, hey, let's walk over this cliff, then we've got a balance, because those confident people who may not have all the information mean that we continue to move forward. But those of us who kind of question ourselves all the time are the ones who say, are we quite sure we should be doing this? So maybe it's about cohesion as well. And Anne Donaghy has said, incredible career journey. So it's surprising you do have imposter syndrome, because you are a magnificent woman engineer. And thank you so much for sharing. What tips do you have for successful transition from each role? And do you have any guiding principles that you can share with the audience?
And so it's interesting, because the only reason I've moved between roles, so I would have never have left the military unless I'd sort of experienced the feeling of a glass ceiling. So every single move I've made is because I haven't felt that there was enough forward progress for me. So I've elected to move roles, and that doesn't mean that people were preventing me from progressing. It just means that the progress that I could see, or the way to progress, wouldn't have been fast enough. So the sort of the pathway that sort of laid out for me to then get to the board level of whatever role it was I was aspiring to would have taken too long. Would have taken like a decade at Gatwick, for example. So I've moved to try and improve my career profile, and to get into the position that I wanted to be in. And so my tip would be, carve out your own career. Don't look at somebody else and go, oh wow, look at Frida, she's amazing. That's the way the career should be. I should be on a career ladder. I should be always taking a promotion. I should always be doing X, Y, Z. Don't look at other people. Decide what it is that's right for you. And so that might be a sideways move. You might want to go deeper. You might want to get more expertise in something rather than getting more managerial responsibility. For me, it was the management responsibility and the technical responsibility that I really wanted to have. And so that's the career path I chose. For other people, it might be greater technical depth. So don't look at other people and choose their path. Choose your path. It might take you a while to figure out what it is, but it's super important. And the other thing that I always try and do is to not move too far. So to try and keep some grounding in the technical expertise that I think I have, or the type of role that it is. So if it's creating a new engineering directorate like it was at Merlin, I knew I'd done that type of thing before when I was in the military, so it was okay. And just convincing yourself there's something that keeps you grounded and that you already have knowledge on is important.
I think that's such good advice, that you're not competing with anybody except yourself, and you don't know what other choices people are making. In your case, you had to sign a contract, thankfully now illegal, that you wouldn't have children, but you might have decided, well, actually, I do want to have a family, and then made different choices. And I've always found that I think the best advice somebody once said to me, which I now give out myself as if it's mine, is keep as many doors open as possible, and when somebody asks you to step through one, say yes.
Definitely, being brave is very important. So don't ever second guess yourself. I've never ever felt comfortable moving roles. It's always been a bit scary, and things have to be a bit scary. So it's okay. It's okay to not feel completely on top of your game and like, oh yeah, this is going to be a breeze. It's going to be scary.
Absolutely. And I also think that, women of our generations, we're a very similar age, we've been a bit trailblazy and role model, and we didn't necessarily intend to do that, but the strides that we've made have made it so much easier for other women to come through. And also, not just because they can see people like you doing these great jobs and having faced these challenges, but because you face these challenges, the systems around you and the roles that you've been in have now changed to be more accepting. I think that's fantastic as well. I have a great question now. What are your thoughts on AI chat GPT changing the role of engineering, and do you think it can assist with a safety mindset?
Yeah, and so I think that there's an awful lot of commentary at the moment about the lack of safety around chat GPT and AI, because people will be thinking it is it's somehow is writing the rules, and it's giving you a correct answer, and it might not be giving you a correct answer. So I think the reliance on it until they've really understood the safety case and tested it is probably we should proceed with caution. Absolutely proceed with caution. It's more an aid, the way I see it currently, and until they've really improved the safety protocols and they can 100% stand behind the output of it, I don't think it should be allowed to change the role of engineering. I think we still need to have that sense check. However, what we should absolutely do is explore the future. So ensuring that we harness it and we make the most of the potential of it is the important piece. But we have to ground it in that safety case first. And I don't think, if I go back to my aviation days, if you were putting a new piece of software on an aircraft, you have to get it to a certain protocol to enable it to go on that aircraft. So I think we should apply the same safety protocol level to AI.
Yes, I have a small confession to make about the Women's Engineering Society, in that we have 50 brilliant women, some of whom we're going to meet today, who have won the top 50 women in engineering for this year, an award I believe that you won in our first round in 2016. And they all submit 400-word citations. It's the only thing they get marked on. And we then have to condense these amazing 400 words into 50 words. So I experimented with ChatGPT, and we came up with a prompt to ask it to produce a 50-word citation, including their work with women engineers and emphasizing safety with British spelling, because we had to put that in. And we asked for 3 prompts, and ChatGPT did come up with them. And then we got a freelance writer to condense those 3 prompts into 1 citation. And I remarked on it as, I think it's about at the moment, I think it's the same as instead of using log tables, you get a scientific calculator. So it did the summarizing very brilliantly for our freelancer, so that she was able to read the original citation, the shorter summaries, and then come up with something a bit more human. And I think if we look at it as a tool in that way, that yes, sadly, some jobs will be taken away, and that's been the case ever since the Luddites broke looms, hundreds of years ago. But I think it will also bring in new jobs, people who can write really good prompts that will give you the information that you need, and people who, instead of having to condense 400 words to 50, can actually use the way the automation works in order to bring a better human side to it. So I think we're in the early days. I think we're seeing some more interesting stuff in terms of robotics. I've just been hearing about surgeons who can sit at a computer and operate tools with using robots that are much more precise than surgeons themselves can be. One surgeon said it feels like cheating, but actually, I think it's more a case of if a machine can make beautiful tiny stitches in human organs in order to heal them better, then surely that's what we should be doing. So I think we've got more to come. Somebody said they love that use of the AI. So it's half. We 50. Do you know the most wonderful thing about doing these citations was our lovely freelancer, who will be coming this afternoon to the afternoon tea, said she was just dumbstruck by how amazing these women are. And every year we have hundreds of women applying for these awards, and every year we get another 50 amazing women. I'm so excited by it. So if you could have changed one thing about your career, it's probably an unfair question, but if you could have changed one thing, what would you have changed that you can talk about?
I would have left the RAF sooner.
Oh, wow.
I absolutely love the RAF, don't get me wrong, but I think at that time I didn't really know how to own my own career, and I trusted the system, and I sort of felt that like lots of young women do, if I worked really hard and if I performed really well, I would get the promotions that I thought I deserved, but it didn't happen that way. Yes, I reached a very senior rank and it was great, but if I'd have left sooner, I think I could have owned my career better. Don't know whether I'd have ended up anywhere different, or whether I'd have been more successful, less successful, I don't know. But it was sort of, it was quite though it gave me a great grounding, it was quite constraining. When once I'd sort of failed to get my promotion to group captain 3 years in a row, that was probably 3 years sort of wasted marking time.
Yeah, I think that's difficult. But again, I go back to where we were in the 80s and the role models that were available to us, because, a lot of women still weren't going out to work, or weren't going out to work full time, or were working in very insignificant roles. And I remember thinking that, administration would be the way that I went. And I ended up in IT, which really changed my life. Do you think now, because we've got so many more women engineers and we've taken these paths, that actually there are more kind of guided routes and more better advice for women engineers?
I don't think there's better advice for anybody yet, to be fair, not just women engineers. I think generally career advice is not where it needs to be yet. And so, I work with some other charities looking at skills, looking at further education rather than higher education, and pathways into engineering. And we haven't got it right yet. We're still not, despite everybody's efforts, we're still not engaging people in engineering enough. And the new exhibits at the Science Museum might well help with that, and the technician pathways and so on. But we haven't quite got it right yet.
Yeah, I find it sad that even today, I was at Lotus Cars yesterday in Norwich. I grew up near there, so it's been quite exciting to go and see them. And there was one young woman there who went to a university technical college, and even still, young men were saying, "What are you doing here?" and being very mean to her. And we find that careers are funneling women into you've got the 3 sciences and maths, then why don't you go and be a doctor or go and do research science? And so I find that all the women who do go into engineering are really determined. They often have to fight their families, their teachers, and then other people around them in order to get there. And the picture of engineering is nearly always one of, oh, it's dirty and it's difficult and it's outside. And we know that that's really, really not the case. Do you think that, I think it's such a shame that we're still having these stereotypes 30 years after you and I, we're making our choices. I always want to say, what can we do better?
And so I think it's really important to get a better understanding of all of the career pathways, and particularly making every workplace inclusive, and making every profession inclusive, and people are far more conscious of it, I think, now than they were definitely 30 years ago. I also think it's really important for us to talk more about the benefits of being a female engineer and a female leader, rather than keep reflecting back on the bad things. So, I talk about the contract I signed, that we could all go on, I think, about the lack of female toilets and goodness knows what else that we've experienced in our career. But if we actually start talking about some of the amazing things that we've experienced and the benefits of being a female leader and manager or a female engineer, and how much better the workplace is for being inclusive, I think that would then start to open up and start to ensure that we engage everybody. So you get to pick the talent from the entire population rather than a small slither of the population, and you break apart some of these old mantras and old challenges, because all of a sudden everybody's engaged, everybody. And we talked about the psychological safety piece earlier. I think that that's so important, and with inclusion, psychological safety comes as well. So that there are so many positives that could be gained if we just sort of change the conversation up a bit and talk about all of the good things. Let's not try and whenever magazines ask for articles about my career or whatever, they say, oh, have you got a picture of you, maybe if you're in a bad an environment with a big spanner, or is there a large machine behind you? Or it's like, I have never ever been in a work environment where I'm wielding a large spanner stood in front of a large machine. It's not going to happen. You don't want to have a picture of me on a construction site with a safety hat and a high vis vest on. Yes, I go on them, but that's not not on a daily basis. It's more like once or twice a month. So it's putting people in the right context, talking about the good things, not focusing on the bad things, and not focusing on the old stereotypical pieces that we've had before.
Well, indeed. In fact, one of the things we do with the top 50 women in engineering, which you can find the brochure on our website, wes.org.uk, we ask them to pose in their workwear because we want to show that it's not all hard hats and high vis, although that does play a role. And nearly always they're dressed in usual business attire because you're in a desk with a laptop, or sometimes at home in your sweatpants or whatever, doing your work. And I love that we can show that. I'm reminded of being told when I first joined WES by a man in his 60s, I believe, that he was changing some machine and it had taken him 4 hours and 3 blokes all huffing and puffing and lifting and moving. And he got back to his office and his female colleague was just laughing. And he said, well, what do you reckon? She said, I couldn't begin to lift that. So he said, okay, you work it out. And so she got together with some female engineers. And guess what? That 4-hour change that was baking the backs of these men took 90 minutes. And they used hoists and they used lifts in order to change the machine. And I love that women, because we can't lift things or run fast or push things, or we actually always think round the corner and we then come up with something much better. I often say to the men I speak to, how many of you would like to go back to the days where there was no wheels on suitcases? I never get anyone say yes, but we only put wheels on suitcases in the 70s because women were traveling alone and didn't have men to carry their bags. So whenever we have women involved in engineering, we always make things better for men as well. I'm also reminded by Lewis Hamilton, who's a young black man in Stevenage, and apparently the reason he's such a good racing driver is because he spent a lot of time trying to avoid bullies in the subways of Stevenage. So he learned a mental map in his mind, he learned to run very fast, and he's used that in his career as possibly the greatest Formula One champion ever. So we also have so many wonderful comments. I mean, everybody loves you, Dawn, as I do. But it's thank you for sharing such great insights. If I may ask, when you consider your next assignments or next path to pursue in your career, what do you consider and how do you pick amongst different possible options? That's a great question.
Yeah, and it's tricky because usually there's sort of 2 or 3 final options that I come down to, and I often think, which is the one that I think I can succeed in and make the most forward career path in. I never ever step into them thinking they're a stepping stone. I step into, I've stepped into all of my role changes thinking that that's the end game and that companies where I will stay. So I think about progression. Is this going to be something that I can progress in and stay with the company? I also think about what is it that I want to get to? So if I finish up at Pure Data Centers, it would be what is it that would bring me joy and allow me to make have the biggest impact going forward. So so I think possibly it might be following Pure, a sort of a non-exec sort of portfolio, just to be able to hopefully apply some of my knowledge and learning to several different companies rather than just one.
Yeah, I remember when I applied for this role, it was just such the perfect role for me because I spent my life working with women, and then I'd also done a lot of engineering completely by accident, and then I'd also worked with charities. So to be running a charity for women in engineering was just like the perfect role. And I've been here, as I said, in August it will be 5 years. I've really enjoyed working here, and I hope to continue. I'm not going anywhere soon, but it is useful to think about, next steps and where it could be. One of the great things about running an organization that's 104 years old is that all of our founders had died before I was born. And I was born in our 49th year. So I'm really a custodian of the society until, the time comes for me to move forward and further on. And I love that because it means I'm not indispensable. It means that I'm taking care of a very, very precious thing that has served women from the time where they got the vote to today, and that in the future somebody else will take over and do that and take it further still. So I think it's right that you should consider next moves and where you're going to be. So thank you very much, Dawn. It's been absolutely a pleasure to speak with you today. And thank you so much for your time and for extending it. I'm sorry we weren't able to bring Amanda to you. So I'm now going to introduce the We50 Awards. So, as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, we had over 200, I think we had about 300 applications for the top 50 women in engineering. We always open nominations on the 11th of February, which is International Day of Women and Girls in Science. Doesn't trip off the tongue as easily as International Women in Engineering Day. And then nominations shut at the end of March. We then judge them. We've got 15 separate judges and they change every year. And then we, having chosen our 50, and we also have another 50 finalists, we then present them. And this year the theme was safety and security. So we were looking for women who had made a difference to make sure that we were safe. And this came from me having a conversation with somebody randomly, completely randomly, I thought, about the concrete central reservations in the motorways in England. And it happened that the woman I was speaking to had been involved in their design. And I said, well, I was always told you shouldn't drive into concrete. And she said, no, because if you drive head on into concrete, you're probably not going to survive. But this was designed, and first of all, they tested the material. Well, of course they had, because this is engineering. And then they'd made the shape correct. And the whole point was that if you're in a crash and you hit the central barrier, your car is not going to go over onto the other carriageway and cause even more devastation. And I love the fact that she took me right through that explanation of why they'd chosen that material and why they'd chosen that shape. So this is why we chose safety and security. And we have found some brilliant women, from cybersecurity to keeping other people safe on building sites or in the environment. And of course, as we always do, it's about the women who are also contributing to sustainability, because we take our responsibility to climate change very seriously, and also to women who are supporting other women in engineering.
50 women in engineering. I'm so proud of them all, and you'll see that we've got people from their early careers right through to their senior careers, and I'm going to be delighted this afternoon to be presenting awards to them, and Dame Dawn Charles will be actually handing the awards over. So thank you very much for bearing with us. Nina Baker joins us now. So Dr. Nina Baker, OBE, she's had a varied career, having become a Merchant Navy deck officer on leaving school, and later took an engineering design degree in her 30s from the University of Warwick. She then gained a PhD in concrete durability from the University of Liverpool. Dr. Baker has lived with her family in Glasgow since 1989, working variously as a materials lecturer in further education and as a university research administrator, and until 2017 as an elected city councillor. Now retired from all that, her interest in promoting STEM careers for girls has led her to become an independent researcher, mainly specialising in the history of women engineering. She is Deacon of the Incorporation of Hammerman of Glasgow from 2022 to 2023. She's been a Deputy Lieutenant in the Glasgow Lieutenancy since 2017 and was appointed an OBE in the 2023 New Year's Honours List for services to the history of women engineering. And I am ever so grateful for Dr. Baker for every time we have an honours list, combing through it to find the women in engineering so that we at the Women's Engineering Society can promote them through our social channels. We're also joined by Anthony Firth, who is Head of Marine Heritage Strategy at Historic England. Anthony is a marine archaeologist by background and has been involved in many aspects of marine heritage on land and under the water throughout his career. Anthony became interested in the role of women in shipbuilding and other maritime sectors during the First and Second World Wars as part of wider research into merchant shipping on the east coast of England. And welcome both of you to the Global International Women in Engineering Day Seminar 2023.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. So you're happy for me to
I'm very happy for you to start presenting.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So just bear with me 2 seconds. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find the right screen to share.
That's okay.
Almost there. Yeah.
Nina Baker. There we go. Excellent.
Righto. Okay, so yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anthony Firth. I'm Head of Marine Heritage Strategy at Historic England. I'm going to give this brief presentation with Nina from WES, who will introduce herself in a moment. So the Historic England is the government's advisor on heritage in England, and our purpose is really to improve people's lives by championing and protecting the historic environment. My particular role is to champion marine and maritime heritage, which includes things under the water such as shipwrecks and the places and communities involved in maritime industries. And as a consequence, I have a special interest in the part that women played in shipbuilding, especially in the First World War, which is itself closely linked to the origins of the Women's Engineering Society immediately after the war in 1919. So I'm going to say more about a project that Historic England is leading on women in shipbuilding in a few minutes. But first I want to flag an initiative that both Nina and I are involved in called Rewriting Women into Maritime History. So this initiative, Rewriting Women into Maritime History, has been initiated by Lloyd's Register Foundation, LRF, which is part of the wider Lloyd's Register group. Lloyd's Register has been central to maritime safety for centuries, and safety remains its core mission today. With such a rich heritage embodied in the work of its Heritage and Education Centre, LRF is keen to learn from the past to use heritage as a catalyst for change. And Rewriting Women is intended to mobilise the history of women in maritime industries to inspire and support women in maritime sectors today and in the future, not just in the UK, but globally. And this chimes strongly with the role that Historic England sees for heritage, mobilising the past to help people, places and communities to thrive. With the support of LRF through their Rewriting Women initiative, we have a project on the stocks that will raise awareness of women in shipbuilding in the past and, we hope, encourage women in shipbuilding and marine engineering for the future. But before providing some more detail on that, I'm going to turn to Nina to provide some insight into the role of women in shipbuilding historically.
Thank you. Well, women have probably always worked in shipyards, but actually finding them is a whole other trick. The earliest known owner, proprietor of a shipyard, an actual shipbuilder, if you like, probably Anne Wyatt, who was building ships in the 17th and 18th century in the River Hamble. She built 7 warships for the Royal Navy between the years of 1691 to 98. But this image you're looking at here isn't her. This is a woman that we would nowadays describe as being somebody who worked on the tools. This is Mary Lacey, who lived from 1740 to 1801. The best recorded of the early shipwrights, because she wrote a book about her experiences and was well known at the time. In 1759, when she was 19 years old, she disguised herself as a boy, started calling herself William Chandler, and she went to sea as a servant to the ship's carpenter. Not a servant in the sense of making his meals or washing his clothes, but more like what we'd call a carpenter's mate, helping him with the work. And she sailed on HMS Sandwich and Royal Sovereign. Then in 1764, so she was by this point 24 years old, she entered a shipwright apprenticeship in Portsmouth Dockyard, working for a number of different masters. She completed her apprenticeship in 1770, and about this time her gender was revealed, but it turned out nobody really cared because they knew by this time that she could do the work. However, the following year, 1771, so she was only 31, the Admiralty granted her a pension because of a workplace-related injury. She hurt her back. So shipyards, always dangerous places. She did later get married and have children and lived to quite a good age, but she had to stop being a shipwright. Next, please. So jumping now over 100 years to the middle of the 19th century, this is Henrietta Lowe Vansittart, who lived from 1833 to 1883. Her father, James Lowe, was a blacksmith and serial inventor and patent holder, and she worked with him closely on his various ideas. The Admiralty stole a number of his ideas without payment, and there was constant law cases. However, he died in 1866 and she took over his work. In 1868, just 2 years later, she got a patent in her own name for this propeller that you're looking at on the left. And the point of this propeller was that it would not churn the water up, which was a problem with other propellers at this period. And it's not a section of a screw thread, but is what's known as a compound curve, which curls in opposite directions from the center to the edges of the blades. The following year, 1869, the Admiralty conducted sea trials with the Lowe Vansittart propeller on HMS Druid, which she went to sea for these trials, which was extremely unusual by this point. And this was in competition with somebody else's propeller known as the Griffiths propeller, which was found to do a lot of the churning I just managed, to the extent that it was basically shaking the ships to bits. So her design was accepted by the Admiralty, and she got many awards for this design, and a model of it is in the London Science Museum. She had a rather colourful private life. She married very young to a man called Frederick Vansittart, who had been an army officer, but she had a lifelong love affair with the well-known writer and politician Edward Bulwer-Lytton. And when Bulwer-Lytton died, he left money to both Frederick and Henrietta. She sadly died following a visit actually to the northeast of England when she had clearly developed some kind of mental instability. Next, please. So now we're in World War I, which Anthony has referred to. And in both world wars, both civilian and military women worked in shipyards doing various things throughout the UK. Then as now, shipyards were jolly dangerous places. If you look at the picture on the left, you can see a World War I shipyard, chaotic, disorganized stuff just lying all over the place. Women in a sort of uniform, but wearing ordinary shoes, no kind of safety concept at all. On the right, this is a picture of a woman called Isabella Crothers from Port Glasgow on the Clyde in Scotland. In 1917, she was a munition worker in the Hamilton shipyards at Port Glasgow, and she was on board a ship that was being built late at night. The ship was completely unlit, and although she was with somebody else, she was carrying just a candle to see her way along the decks, and she fell down an unguarded open hatchway in the dark and was killed. In the inquest, the fatal accident inquiry, the judge said that surely these ships should have been lit at night, and surely open hatchways should have ropes or railings around them. And you wouldn't think it needed a judge to suggest this, but clearly it did. Next, please. Now we're in World War II, and the picture on the left is from the Imperial War Museum, and it shows Agnes Smith, who was born probably in about 1889, here with a small part of her 45-strong team of female welders at one of the Greenock shipyards, not far from Port Glasgow, which I was just mentioning, on the Clyde. She had worked in engineering in the Greenock shipyards in World War I, and I often wonder if she and Isabella Crowther knew each other before the latter's death. But by the Second World War, because of her previous experience, she was made forewoman of this large team of female welders. And in some of the other shipyards along the Clyde, there was a tiny number of female ship's electricians working, one of whom is still alive, a woman called Netta Harvey, who is a member of Mine Corporation of Hammerman. She's over 100 years old now. So the Ministry of Labour was trying to promote shipyard work, and this is the cover of one of their leaflets, where you can see a woman heating up rivets for the ships. And there were one or two women actually managed to hang on to these jobs after the Second World War. There's a picture of a woman doing the same sort of work in the 1950s, although interestingly, she seems to be working with a coloured person. I do wonder if the other workers thought, well, I'm not working with a woman and I'm not working with a coloured guy, we'll put them together. But this was dangerous work, no safety equipment. The woman doing the rivet heating is in more or less domestic clothing. So we've come a long way since then, but women are still very plentiful in shipyards. Back to you, Anthony.
That's great. Thank you, Nina. So the project that Historic England is leading is focusing on women in shipbuilding in northeast England, especially on the Tyne during the First World War. What we want to do is to draw attention to women's work in heavy and precision engineering in the shipyards, and also to seek new information about women shipbuilders from their own families and communities. So we're going to be working with WES, with the Imperial War Museum and Newcastle University to mount an exhibition on Tyneside of photographs of women in shipbuilding, drawing on a remarkable series of photographs held in the collections of the Imperial War Museums. The exhibition is going to be accompanied by public history activities, encouraging people to bring to light their own stories, photographs and memorabilia of grandmothers and great aunts who worked in the shipyards. We'll help to make connections between these family and community histories and the shipyards themselves that still provide such an important sense of place. We're also going to be making connections between the ships these women worked on and the rich documentary records held by the Lloyd's Register Foundation. And in some cases, we hope to make connections back to the industrial heritage of these women, which still lies on the seabed as shipwrecks. Now, the project's due to kick off in September, and we'll be working closely with WES to spread the word about women in shipbuilding and rewriting women into maritime history at that point. So watch this space. Thank you for watching. Thank you.
Thank you. And a fascinating run through women in shipbuilding throughout the years. And also, you know, the moment when women reveal themselves as women and they're actually still taken seriously. It's fantastic. Anne Donaghy has said, thank you for highlighting women in these important maritime roles. Were their safety needs catered for at all, or were they invisible women expected to cope with the same conditions as men? Anne says, I think I might know the answer, but it'd be super interesting to find out if they were actually better looked after.
Do you want to go ahead with that, Nina?
I doubt if it would have been any better. There may have been toilets provided for them, if you consider that a safety issue. But in many munitions works where there had been women working in the factory before and it was converted to munitions, but the hygiene facilities were appalling. In the shipyards, I think the men peed behind the nearest girder. So I doubt if there was any special consideration. You can see from the clothes in the First World War, they were given overalls, but the pictures from the Second World War, sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't.
Yeah, I think that point about the clothing is interesting, actually. So if you see the photographs of the men working in shipyards alongside women, then they're not in any kind of uniform, whereas the women do have a uniform and are wearing trousers, which is in itself perhaps a step at that time. So there is, in a sense, some kind of special provision, but quite what the meaning of that is something that we're looking forward to finding out a bit more about. So there is, in a sense, some form of PPE, but not relative to men. But other than that, I don't think there's much distinction.
Well, the main consideration in all munition workers are probably the same reason in the shipyards. Everybody was terrified of women's long hair getting caught in machines, which was a realistic concern because it did happen and several people were scalped or worse. So part of the purpose of the uniform was so that women's loose clothing wasn't catching in things and women's long hair wasn't catching. So yeah, I guess that's a special consideration.
Yes, and it'd be great if PPE today was actually better fitting for women, I think, because women can still get their long sleeves caught in. And I've been at a number of events in the last couple of days, and I've met Christina Rampieri, who's working on submarines, and I know about naval architects, and there's Nicola Graham-Slaw, who works at HMS Brunel. So it's great to see that women have been working in shipbuilding for very, very many years and are still there. Thank you both for your presentation today. It's always lovely to hear about our heritage. And as a 104-year-old organisation, I feel it's important for us to remember who's gone before. The founders of WES were entirely interested in helping women to become engineers, and they made a great deal of history on the way. And we still continue that ethos today. We're custodians of our history, but also contributors to our future. So we want to encourage more young women and older women to be engineers, and I'm sure they will make their own history. So thank you very much again, Anthony and Dr. Nina Baker. Really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to move on to our amazing We50 panel, who I am delighted to begin introducing here now. Bear with me one moment. And we have 4 fantastic women. And I can see 2 of you so far. I'm just waiting for the other 2 to join us. And yes, and it feels like I've got a screenshot of the 2 of you as well. Aha, Nicola's there, great. We're just waiting for Chisholm. Actually, it's lovely to see you, Nicola. I haven't seen you for about 10 years, I think, since we were last working together at the Royal Aeronautical Society.
Which is where I am, this isn't my home decor, by the way. This is Royal Aeronautical Society.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm delighted to introduce Chisholm Akajobi Ezeonieka, who is a power electronics and systems engineer for Rootwave. She is the only female engineer at Rootwave and has created a safe and eco-friendly alternative to herbicides by designing a power electronic system that kills weeds using electricity and 0 chemicals. She's also a STEM ambassador, actively encouraging girls and women to pursue STEM careers. I told you they were amazing, didn't I? Professor Nicholas Simmons is the director of NC Squared Engineering Consultancy at the University of Southampton. From leading aviation forensics to establishing a successful consultancy unit, Professor Simmons has become a renowned expert in failure analysis. Her commitment to a family-friendly working environment and her efforts in outreach activities contribute to promoting diversity in STEM. And that's science, technology, engineering, and maths, or manufacturing, for those who don't understand that acronym. Professor Simmons was awarded the title of Professorial Fellow Enterprise in recognition of her achievements, very well deserved. Emma Jonsen is the Personal Care Research R&E Director, Europe, Middle East and Africa for Kimberly-Clark. Johnson is a passionate chemical engineer whose leadership in the feminine care sector aims to address the challenges of menstrual stigma, accessibility and sustainability, going beyond technical specifications to empower women. As the R&E Director at Kimberly-Clark, she successfully expanded the business, launched new products and supported social programs for girls. And Titilola Oliide. Titilola Oliide plays a vital role. She's a senior process safety engineer at Supercritical Solutions, where she plays a vital role in developing green hydrogen production technology. She leads hazard identification workshops, ensures fail-safe system design, and provides technical expertise. In addition, she passionately volunteers her time to STEM outreach programs, mentoring PhD students and inspiring young girls to pursue engineering careers. Welcome all four of you, amazing women, truly well-deserved winners. And so I'm going to begin by asking you all to let me know, what does winning a Top 50 Women in Engineering Award mean to you? And we'll begin with Chisholm.
Okay. Hi, everyone. First of all, before I answer that, I would just like to correct the fact that I'm not the only female engineer. I'm the only female in power electronics department. And we have a couple of female engineers. I wrote that in my LinkedIn post. Winning the top 50 means a lot to me because being a young girl and not even knowing what the engineering industry was all about, I just entered into it because I somehow found a family friend that introduced me to engineering, but I didn't know about the field in any way. So being among the top 50 women kind of helps me recognize the process of like my acknowledgements through so far, one, and secondly it helps me like boost my profile to be able to go back to the industry, because as a lady in the industry most times you suffer from imposter syndrome. It's difficult to really say, how far you've come and actually take that in and take that recognition in. But these top 50 women gives you that recognition you deserve, to be able to also encourage you to push other younger ones to come into STEM. So it's really a very big milestone, a very big accomplishment that I don't take for granted.
That's really great. Thank you, Chisholm. Professor Simmons, tell me, what does this award mean for you?
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm just honoured to be even considered in this group. And I'm particularly pleased that it's to do with safety and security and, as you say, making it seen, because we're kind of often hidden in the background, especially if we're not making a big product. I mean, I'm looking at air crash investigations, so it's not something I can point at and say, I worked on this, etc. So it's nice that we're doing this activity to bring people to the forefront. But yeah, it means a lot. I mean, especially in my role now as a senior role in the university, I feel myself as more of a role model for people coming through, to be able to highlight what WES is doing and highlight that women engineers are out there and active in this is great to be even considered in this group. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Emma, what does winning a We50 award mean for you?
Thank you very much. And congratulations to everyone else in the W50. It's a fantastic achievement, everybody. So congratulations to everyone on the screen. So it's a great question, and I took some time to reflect on this. And this is a fantastic recognition, and winning this award means a lot. And I'm humbled and honored, but I'm also truly thankful to be able to represent women who has a similar leadership to me that I have across the UK within women in engineering, so within engineering and research. And when I reflected on it, I sort of thought, we live in a world which has an incredible pace nowadays. And we start to innovate with an equal greater space and pace with the technology, the science, and the development that we do. So when you start to look at this, we as innovator, we need to also redefine ourselves on how we innovate and how we drive our development. And I think this award is a demonstration of that, because we're coming together very differently nowadays to support with this fast-moving world that we live in. And what that means is that we drive diversity of skills, we drive diversity of minds, and we drive diversity of gender. And I think this nomination and, the whole setup around International Women Engineering really demonstrates, the support of that. So thank you for being part of that.
Thank you. And Titilola, what does winning a We50 award mean for you?
Thank you very much for the question, and congratulations to everyone. So I'll just summarize that in recognition and representation, and I'll start with representation because I moved to the UK about 10 years ago, and I started my career about 9 years ago. And just being able to, most of the people that I've seen as role models have come from the knowing people that have been recognized on different occasions, including International Women in Engineering Day. And so being part of the WE50 is also that is helping me, that would help me to also pay it forward, and also, to inspire other people and make sure that people know that you can be what you see. And it's, of course, it's also a recognition of the work that I've been able to do in collaboration with other amazing engineers, drive innovation and work on life-changing and impactful projects. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to, I'm going to slightly mix up the order a bit so that we don't get into a cycle. So I'm going to come to you, Nicola. What are your top tips for women engineers in safety and security? I mean, you've been working in our accident investigation and various other areas. So safety's always been your bag. So what are your top tips for women? You have muted yourself, so isn't that the perennial call on video
There
calls?
we go. I'm back.
There we go.
There we go. What I was trying to say when I dubbed myself was not letting imposter syndrome win. I mean, I think that was something that I had in my early career was, thinking that you possibly shouldn't be there. You grow up and then seeing people on the telly doing the job that I do and things like that. And it's just like, now I'm doing it. They're trusting me. Do I really know what I'm talking about? And then especially in a very male dominated world. So I would say, don't let that win. I think for working in safety, obviously remain focused on what you do. It's safety critical. So don't be afraid to speak up, because your idea might be the one that makes a difference. It's a safety difference. So don't be shy, step forward. I think if you can encourage an environment where everybody can have free-flowing ideas, because at the end of the day, the safety is the most important thing usually in these topics we're talking about. So yeah, that would be my top tips for young female engineers or any engineer coming into safety work, is to speak up. Your ideas might make the difference.
Thank you. And coming to you, Titilola, you'll need to unmute. What are your top tips for women in for safety and security?
Thank you very much. So what I would say is, for women engineers, particularly working in safety and security, would be to encourage systems thinking. So for safety engineers, a lot of times you have to know a little bit about everything to be able to make sure that the engineering systems that are working safely and are properly secure. And so it's very important to learn a bit about everything, to be curious and be able to transfer knowledge from one industry to the other. And I'd also follow what Professor Nicola has said in terms of don't be afraid to speak up. A lot of times, because safety is really in the background, some people tend to not want to listen to ideas from safety engineers, but don't be afraid to speak up, because you play a critical role as well in engineering engineering of the system. So that's really important. And I would say the last thing as well is to stay adaptable in this world. We're currently working on innovative things, in the engineering space, in different industries. And so it's being able to encourage that innovation whilst also staying safe and secure. And I would say those are the 3 top tips that I would give to women in engineering and engineering safety.
I think that's some really terrific advice. Thank you. And Shizam, what about you? What are your top tips for women in safety and security?
My top tips would be firstly, it's easy to be in this career and fall back. It's almost like a behind the scenes area. So my top tips would be to encourage you to engage more with people, especially in that area. So this has given us, We50 has given us an avenue to meet with more ladies, to meet with more women that are doing similar things to us, but also to encourage you in that field. So that's one of my top tips. So try and engage more with people in your area. Secondly, always strive to do the best, because at the end of the day, it's all about safety of humans, animals, and environment. So you know that at the end of the day, you're doing to save the environment, you're doing to save human lives, and that's what engineering is all about.
Thank you. That's excellent. And Emma, finally, what are your top tips here?
Yeah, I think there's some great things that's been mentioned already. One of the more overwhelming advice that I would love to give women, inventors and women in engineering, is really to create a strong mentorship and a strong sponsorship. And especially women have very high expectation on ourselves. And I know this, includes also for men, but statistics really say that if we have an environment that we can nourish and flower, with the way that we have created a mentorship where we actually can start to believe in ourselves. And I think that is really important. And personally, I have had a great mentorship and a sponsorship throughout my career to become a leader and, you drive the confidence from others and also believe in yourself. So I think my advice would be, whatever that looks like in your environment and however you define, and how to believe in yourself and how you can create that environment, I would strongly advise to do that. And as a leader today, in a bigger organization in research and engineering, I am supporting many women and men throughout, to grow their talent, but also to grow their confidence and believing in themselves.
I think that's excellent. And we at WES have always been keen on mentoring. In fact, next year marks 20 years of our mentoring program, MentorSet, back when STEM was called SET for Science, Engineering and Technology. And I do recommend that you can join WES and get some mentoring through us. Or if you are somebody who's interested in mentoring somebody else, you can do that too. So coming to you, TC, what are you working on next? You've done some really great work so far. So what's the next project for you?
Yes, so for me, we're currently working on building a very innovative system, which is high pressure hydrogen electrolyzers. So that's currently on the lab scale, and we're working on moving on to the demonstrator scale, and keep scaling it to get to support the UK strategy as well, in terms of how much hydrogen we'll be producing in the UK by 2030. So we want to be a key part of that. The company I work for, Solutions. So that's really exciting. Scaling up, safety is a critical point of that. So yeah, looking forward to that, the challenges, but also the lessons that we'll learn and the sort of impacts that we'll be able to make as well in climate change and sustainability.
Fabulous. Coming to you, Nicola. I mean, you've moved from aircraft investigation to now being an academic and directing this unit. What's on the cards for you next?
Well, I still do air accident investigation. In fact, the unit I set up at the university is a consultancy unit. So I've got a team of people working for me, and we solve industry's problems directly and work for AIB, marine accident and rail accident as well. So I've got to continue my passion and continue my work from when I used to do at the MOD and now here. So I will be continuing that, really. The unit is growing bigger every year. We're helping more people. We're doing some great work with different projects. The biggest project we've got on at the moment is with HMS Victory, actually, tie into the shipbuilding we heard earlier. So they can rest assured, although women might not have been involved in making that ship in the first place, we're definitely involved in keeping it shipshape for the future, because we're doing lots of scientific tests for them to ensure it's going to be okay for the next 50 years. But yeah, those are the exciting projects I've got on at the moment. Touch wood, nobody will need my fail investigation services, and I can just work on product development for people. So yeah, that's.
I was hugely delighted and honoured to have been, during our centenary year, to have dinner on HMS Victory at the courtesy of the Navy in Nelson's cabin. I mean, it was an absolute wonderful experience. And seeing, it's a magnificently large ship, but it had over 700 sailors on it, and they just lived in these tiny spaces. So I think that's such a great job. And again, it's a bit like we were talking about with Dame Dawn Childs, that, you know, we have to keep these things safe so that it can continue to be a great attraction and a great source of research and history for people for many years to come. So Shizm, what's you working on next?
So currently we have a big project going on at Rootwave. So for those that don't know, Rootwave is a company that does kill weed with electricity, basically with zero chemicals. So it's an alternative to herbicides. So we try to make your food safe. So now we are working on a project. I'll call it an invention, more like an e-weeder project, where you kill weed with electricity. So it's called e-weeder. So if you browse Rootwave, you'll be able to see it. So I'm working on that currently. It's due to be out next year. So it's a big project we're working on. And yeah, we're going through it in phases. So that's the project I'm on right now.
Oh, this is very exciting. I mean, I'm delighted that there's a way of not just using weed killer so that our food is safe, but of course it keeps insects safe. You know, we don't want to lose our bees and butterflies and our pollination. And finally, but last but not least, Emma, what's your next project?
Sure. So we'll probably answer this a little bit like a politician, right? So since you work in an organization with a lot of competitive mindset. So I would say that, first of all, being an engineer, what's empowered me the most is really to be able to make a change and make a positive change in what you create. So if you start to look at our company, Kimberly Clark, where I work, it is a personal care and household company, that manufacture and market products. And, from when you start to look at our purpose, our true purpose is around better care for a better world. So what not better start to innovate and understand and make sure that we drive what drives the most consumer-centric related executions that actually touches the consumers the best, and we're making it different from a social impact perspective. So taking that in perspective, and you had a great introduction to me earlier, Elizabeth, and it is around, working within the Fem Wellness brand. And here we innovate solution and drive solution within the overall region where I work in Middle East and Africa and also Europe, on solutions that, really helps to champion women's progress in whatever she would like to do. And it is anything from accessibility to make sure that girls really goes to school, to actually drive, their stronger, the progress of career and talent moving forward. So that's one, excuse me, so that's one piece of the work that I do. And another element around, I also look after our baby care brands. So if you start to think about the EMEA region again, and we will welcome over 300 million babies in the coming 5 years. So what not more empowering to be able to create solutions for these little ones, right? That they have an equitable, healthy start in their lives. So, these are the areas that we're working on, from really driving a purposeful, consumer-centric solutions to make a better care for the better world.
I think that it's really wonderful that we're seeing engineering in these very basic issues for women that we've had to deal with for so many thousands of years. And prior to the pandemic, I worked with an organisation that supply AfroPads. We used to hold a Christmas quiz where people paid a lot of money to have a very good night out, but we raised an absolute fortune for AfroPads so that we were able to give women sanitary wear, particularly in the developing countries of Africa. And this really helps women go to school and to work because, you know, a lot of times if they don't have the correct sanitary wear, they're not in a position, you have to stay at home. So I think that really is quite revolutionary and a shame that in the 21st century we still need it. So I'm just going to, we've only got a few minutes left because I know people have other things to get on with, but I'm so excited to have met you all and I'm really excited we're going to have the afternoon tea shortly so I can talk to you more closely. But just in the like 10, 15 seconds, what's your ideal project if there's no money, if you've got all the money, all the time and all the energy in the world? Emma, let's come to you first.
So I think my 15 seconds are gone already with this mute button. So I'll make it even shorter. No, I would say, you know, innovate and make something impossible possible and innovate for your true purpose. And my true purpose is to innovate, to make sure that the generation and the impact that we give in the generation where I live is to give something better to my children to live in.
Excellent. And Titilola, what's your ideal project? Time, money, energy, no question.
Yeah, so I'm quite passionate about the energy industry because I feel like when you have accessible and accessible and cheap energy, then it just permeates every society. So I believe that I do project to be one where we are working with a diverse range of people, making sure everyone that is, because energy is literally everyone's business, have diverse representation of people there, and we get to work as a team on each and everyone's strengths and just create a better solution for the world. So definitely something in the energy industry.
That's terrific. Coming to you, Nicola, what's your time, money, energy, no object? What's your ideal project?
Oh, that's quite difficult, actually. As a consultant, I get to work on so many different things every day. So that I already get to, and I get to work with great people. So I would say teamwork, being able to work in a team with all the different outputs and things and values that people have. I would say one of the things, having worked in this sector for quite some time, I do often find myself investigating the same problem. So I think if time and if I had no budget or unlimited budget, I say, is to get those messages and lessons learned out to everybody. How do we suddenly take what's been studied or understood from the forensic work? I mean, we already do have a loop to try and get it back in, but to get it everywhere so nobody makes the same mistake twice. I think if we can just learn instantly and propagate that information out there, that would be the magic tool. I think would be a instant understanding of lessons learned.
Absolutely. And somebody once said to me, if you don't make mistakes, you don't make anything. And I love that in engineering, and I think particularly in your business, making mistakes is really important because that's how we learn. So don't be frightened to make mistakes, but when you've made the mistake, do learn from it so that you don't make it again. And finally, Chisholm, what's your project given time, money, energy, no problem?
To be honest, that's quite a challenging question because as humans, our needs change over time. But I think for me, ideally, at the moment, I'll say I'm working on my ideal project. Prior to now, I didn't really have full understanding of how the food web chain and how the farmers deal with basic things like killing weed. So anything that has to do with solving a human need around and within my career field and strength, that would be my ideal project.
Thank you so much. It's been so fantastic to hear all of your projects. I'm sorry, I don't know why Titi and Emma have been put as focus. We've done something with the view to make that so, but it's been absolutely brilliant to meet 4 of our wonderful 50 women from the top 50 women in engineering. And today is such a brilliant day. Once again, we are trending at #1 on Twitter in the UK. We're still trending. Let's see if we can keep it up all day. This is despite the fact that Twitter has nearly been broken by Mr. Musk, but we'll see what we can do. Um, it's been my pleasure as Chief Executive of the Women's Engineering Society to see International Women in Engineering Day grow. And one of the permanent changes since the pandemic is this global webinar, because we've been able to see women from and other attendees from all over the world join us. I can safely say with confidence that we've had attendees from Australia, Italy, Germany, South Africa, Malaysia, the United States of America, Canada, Kenya, India, Trinidad and Tobago, Greece, Nigeria, Spain, and East Africa. And I'm sure there are many, many more who haven't spoken in the chat who have come from different countries. We have statistics across the world that have we've potential reach on social media is running into the millions. Not that we're going to neglect International Women in Engineering Day, but it's so successful now. I'm so sure that if we decided to take a rest, it would just carry on without us. But I assure you, we will be continuing to promote International Women in Engineering Day for many years to come, because look at these amazing women, the women from history, our President, Dame Dawn Charles, and our wonderful top 50 women in engineering. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you all today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. There's plenty more celebrations to come, and they will run on into the rest of the week. Congratulations to our winners, and congratulations to everyone who's attending, and I hope you have a lovely, lovely day. Thank you.